The film opens with a disturbing mystery. Several victims are found dead, and each crime carries a strange message from a killer calling himself the Executioner. When a Scotland Yard employee becomes another victim, Detective Mike Brixan is brought into the case. His investigation becomes more complicated when he discovers that the killer's letters were written on a typewriter with two unusual characters. While questioning Ruth Sanders, Brixan finds a page from a film script produced on the same typewriter. That discovery makes the film set the center of his investigation. The strongest part of this story is the way it connects an ordinary-looking film production with a hidden murder mystery. Instead of giving the detective an obvious criminal to chase, the story makes him look at actors, technicians, and people around the production. Everyone can appear suspicious, and that keeps the mystery moving. The 1960s setting also gives the film a special, old-fashioned crime atmosphere. There are no modern computers, cameras, or digital records to solve the case. Brixan has to depend on observation, questioning people, physical clues, and patient detective work. That makes his investigation feel slower than a modern thriller, but it also gives the story its character. Heinz Drache is important to the success of the film because Mike Brixan needs to look intelligent without becoming too dramatic. His performance works best when he quietly studies people and situations. He does not need to shout every time he finds a clue. His calm approach makes the investigation believable within the style of the period. Duscha also gives the story another useful angle through Ruth Sanders. She is not simply there as a person for the detective to question. Because she was the last person to see the murdered man alive, she becomes connected to the mystery. Her presence naturally raises questions. Does she know more than she is saying? Is she in danger? Could someone connected to the film production be hiding something? This is where the movie understands the basic rule of a good mystery. Information should not be given too easily. The audience should have enough clues to become curious, but not enough information to immediately solve everything. The idea of the killer using a special typewriter is especially effective. Today, such a clue may seem simple, but in a story set in this period, it becomes meaningful. A typewriter has physical characteristics, and the unusual characters can help investigators connect apparently separate documents. It is a small clue, but it gives Brixan something concrete to follow. The film also benefits from the Edgar Wallace source material. Wallace's crime stories often depend on strange crimes, hidden identities, suspicious characters, and detectives who slowly bring different pieces together. The movie carries that traditional mystery feeling. At the same time, there are weaknesses. The story can sometimes feel more complicated than necessary because there are many people around the investigation. When too many characters are introduced, the audience has to remember who each person is and why that person might matter. This can make some scenes feel slower. Another limitation is that the movie follows the crime style of its time. Viewers who are used to modern thrillers may expect faster editing, more action, and constant twists. The Avenger does not work that way. It takes time to establish the mystery and lets the detective move through it step by step. But that slower rhythm is also part of its charm. The film is not trying to compete with today's action-heavy crime movies. Its main attraction is the mystery itself. The setting around the film studio is another interesting choice. A film set naturally contains people who can pretend to be someone else. Actors perform roles, scripts contain fictional stories, and everyone is used to costumes and false identities. Putting a real murderer into such an environment creates an interesting contrast between acting and reality. That makes Brixan's job more difficult. He is not simply searching for a criminal in a normal location. He is investigating people whose professional lives already involve pretending. A person can appear innocent while hiding something, and another person can appear suspicious simply because of his behavior. This idea gives the film some psychological interest. The question is not only who killed these people, but also who can be trusted. The black four-door sedan is another classic detective clue. It is not a complicated piece of evidence, but it gives the investigation a physical direction. In an older crime film, small details like a car, a typewriter, or a page of paper can become important because there are fewer sources of information. One merit of the film is that it respects the detective process. Brixan does not magically know the answer. He gathers information, compares clues, and follows connections. That makes the final solution more satisfying when the pieces begin to fit. The movie also creates an atmosphere of danger without needing excessive graphic violence. The murders are frightening mainly because of what they suggest. The identity of the killer becomes more important than showing every violent act in detail. The title, The Avenger, fits the story because the murderer presents himself as someone carrying out a personal mission. The name The Executioner makes the killer sound almost like a figure of judgment. That creates a question about motivation. Is this simply a criminal killing random people, or is there a hidden connection among the victims? That question is what gives the investigation its emotional foundation. The biggest merit of the film is therefore its basic mystery idea. A group of apparently unrelated victims, strange letters, a unique typewriter, and a connection to a film production provide enough material for a classic detective story. Its biggest weakness is that the storytelling can feel dated. Some character development is not as deep as a modern audience might expect, and certain parts of the investigation may feel slow. The movie depends heavily on atmosphere and clues rather than constant excitement. Still, that does not make it unsuccessful. In fact, for viewers who enjoy classic European crime cinema and Edgar Wallace adaptations, the slower approach can be enjoyable. The Bavaria Studios setting also adds historical interest. The film was shot in Munich, but the story creates an English crime environment through its Scotland Yard connection. This gives the production a distinctive combination of German filmmaking and British-style mystery. The production design by Willi Herrmann contributes to that atmosphere. Older crime films often gain much of their personality from locations, interiors, vehicles, and clothing. These details help the audience enter the world of the story. The film's age is important when judging it. A 1960 crime thriller should not be judged only by the standards of a 2026 thriller. The technology, pacing, and acting style belong to another period. Within that framework, the movie has several effective ideas. The detective character is another strong point. Mike Brixan is not presented simply as a man who fights criminals. His main weapon is his ability to notice details. That makes him suitable for a story based on clues. Ruth Sanders is also important because she connects the detective to the film production. Her position gives Brixan a reason to examine the people working around the set. Without that connection, the investigation might remain too broad. The typewriter clue is probably the smartest part of the setup because it transforms a small physical detail into a major investigative lead. A page of a script may look completely ordinary, but once Brixan notices that it was written using the same machine as the killer's letters, it becomes evidence. That is the kind of clue classic detective stories do well. Something ordinary suddenly becomes suspicious because the detective knows how to look at it. The film also creates uncertainty by making several people possible suspects. This is important because a mystery becomes weak if the answer is obvious from the beginning. Here, the connection between the murders and the film set opens several possibilities. The audience can start asking questions along with Brixan. Maybe the killer is an actor, maybe it is someone working behind the scenes, maybe the film production itself has nothing to do with the murders, and the typewriter connection is only a trap. That uncertainty keeps the story alive. Another merit is the balance between police investigation and personal questioning. Brixan does not simply sit in an office studying files. He moves around, talks to people, and observes their behavior. That gives the investigation a physical presence. However, the film could have benefited from stronger emotional depth among some of its supporting characters. The mystery is clearly the priority, so some people mainly function as pieces in the investigation rather than fully developed human beings. That is a common limitation in older mystery films. The detective and the puzzle receive more attention than the emotional lives of everyone involved. The movie's final impact depends on the revelation of the killer and the explanation behind the murders. Without giving away more than the supplied story, the important point is that the investigation eventually turns the scattered clues into a connected picture. That is exactly what a detective film should do. Early clues that appear unrelated should become meaningful later. The film therefore works best when watched as a traditional mystery rather than as an action thriller. If someone expects constant fights, explosions, or rapid chase scenes, the experience may feel slow. But if the viewer enjoys clues, suspicion, investigation, and old-fashioned suspense, the movie has plenty to offer. Its atmosphere is another reason to watch it. There is something naturally interesting about a crime story from this period. The old cars, telephones, offices, clothing, film studios, and investigative methods create a world that feels very different from modern crime movies. The movie also shows how much detective storytelling can accomplish with simple objects. A typewriter can become a major clue. A car can become a lead. A page of paper can connect a murder to an entirely different group of people. That simplicity can be refreshing. The main performance by Heinz Drache holds the investigation together. He gives Mike Brixan the necessary authority and seriousness. The character does not need to become larger than the mystery itself. His job is to guide the audience through the puzzle. Ingrid van Bergen's presence adds another dimension to the cast, while Duscha's Ruth provides an important connection to the central investigation. The film's direction by Hubert Cornfield is also worth noticing. Cornfield not only directed the movie but wrote the screenplay, so the story and visual treatment come from the same creative direction. He also produced the film with Maury Dexter. That gives the production a clear personal identity. Because the screenplay comes from Edgar Wallace's novel The Avenger, the movie has a strong literary mystery foundation. Adaptations always face the problem of compressing a novel into a film, and some of the complexity may feel uneven. Still, the central detective idea survives. One of the film's most interesting qualities is its combination of two worlds, crime investigation and filmmaking. The film set becomes almost another character in the story because it creates an environment where appearance and reality are constantly mixed. That makes the title and subject especially suitable for a thriller. In filmmaking, people create illusions. In the murder investigation, someone is also creating an illusion by hiding his true identity. The story, therefore, has a natural theme of appearance versus reality. The movie also deserves credit for not depending entirely on romance. Although there are women connected to the story, the central engine remains the murder investigation. The emotional material supports the mystery instead of replacing it. The weaknesses are mainly related to pacing, characterization, and the conventions of its period. Some scenes may feel longer than necessary. Some supporting characters could have been given more depth, and modern viewers may find the detective methods old-fashioned. But these are not reasons to dismiss the film. They are simply part of understanding what kind of movie The Avenger is. As a classic crime thriller, it has a clear identity. It wants the audience to watch carefully, notice small details, and wonder who is hiding the truth. The idea of several apparently unrelated victims is especially effective because it creates a larger question. If the victims have nothing in common, why are they being killed? Once the investigation finds a connection, the story becomes more interesting because the audience realizes that the killer's plan is not random. That gradual movement from confusion to understanding is the heart of the film. The movie also shows why detective stories remain popular. Technology changes, but the basic attraction of a mystery does not. People still enjoy watching a detective discover something that everyone else missed. Brixan's investigation gives the audience that satisfaction. The black sedan is a good example. On its own, it is only a vehicle, but in a murder investigation, it becomes evidence. The typewriter is similar. It is an everyday object, but its unusual characters make it valuable. These details make the film feel like a puzzle. The best mystery films understand that the audience wants to participate. We should not simply be told who the criminal is. We should be allowed to wonder, suspect, and change our minds. The Avenger follows that tradition. Its atmosphere is darker than its straightforward plot description may suggest. The killer's letters create a feeling of menace because they show confidence. The murderer does not simply hide, he communicates with the police and gives himself a frightening name. That behavior makes the criminal feel psychologically different from an ordinary murderer. The story also benefits from the Scotland Yard connection. Scotland Yard has long been associated with British detective fiction. So using a Scotland Yard investigator immediately tells the audience that they are entering a classic crime story world. At the same time, the film's German production background gives it a slightly different visual personality. The combination is one of the movie's historical attractions. If we talk about the merits clearly, the first is the central mystery. The second is the detective character. The third is the typewriter clue. The fourth is the film set setting. The fifth is the atmosphere. The sixth is the connection to Edgar Wallace's crime storytelling. The seventh is the controlled use of suspense rather than depending only on action. The performances also support the story, particularly Heinz Drache's work as Mike Brixan. The demerits are equally clear. The pace can be slow for modern viewers. Some characters are more functional than fully developed. The mystery may feel less surprising to people who have watched many later crime films. Some storytelling conventions are visibly from the 1960 period, and viewers looking for emotional complexity or modern psychological depth may find the film limited. But those weaknesses should be balanced against the film's strengths. The movie has a strong old-school personality. It does not try to be modern. It belongs to a period when crime films depended on investigation, atmosphere, and physical clues. That is precisely why it can still be interesting. There is also a certain pleasure in watching the detective work without today's technology. No quick database search can solve the problem. Brixan has to physically find documents, talk to witnesses, and make connections. That gives every clue more weight. The film reminds us that good detective work is not always about having more technology. Sometimes it is about paying attention. That idea remains relevant. The film's use of the movie set is probably its most distinctive storytelling choice. Once Brixan realizes that the killer's typewriter may be connected to the production, the entire environment becomes suspicious. Actors and crew members are no longer simply background figures. Any one of them could potentially be connected to the crime. This creates a closed-circle mystery feeling. A closed-circle mystery works because the audience knows that the answer is somewhere within the group. That naturally encourages viewers to examine everyone's behavior. The film does not need a huge number of locations to create suspense. The investigation itself provides movement. The director's choice to keep the mystery at the center helps the movie avoid becoming too distracted. The production design also contributes to the period atmosphere. The locations and interiors do not feel like modern spaces, and that difference gives the film historical value. For people interested in older cinema, this can be just as interesting as the mystery itself. The film also has value as an example of how Edgar Wallace's stories traveled across countries and filmmaking traditions. A British crime novel becomes the foundation for a West German film with an international setting and a detective connected to Scotland Yard. That makes The Avenger more than just a murder mystery. It is also a small piece of European genre film history. The final judgment, then, is fairly positive. The Avenger is not a perfect thriller, and it will not satisfy every modern viewer. Its pacing can be slow, its character development is limited, and its storytelling style belongs clearly to an earlier period. But the movie has a solid mystery foundation, a good central detective, memorable clues, and an interesting film set connection. Most importantly, it understands what makes a crime story enjoyable. Someone has committed a terrible crime. The police do not know why, the clues seem disconnected, and one determined detective refuses to stop until the pieces make sense. That basic formula still works. For viewers who enjoy classic detective movies, Edgar Wallace adaptations, old European crime cinema, or stories built around clues rather than non-stop action, The Avenger is worth watching. It may not move at today's speed, but it has its own rhythm. It asks the viewer to slow down, watch carefully, and let the mystery develop. And sometimes that is exactly what an old crime film needs. Overall, the film's greatest strength is its atmosphere and mystery structure, while its biggest weakness is its dated pace and limited character depth. Heinz Drache gives the story a dependable detective at its center, and the unusual typewriter clue gives the investigation a memorable direction. The result is a classic-style thriller that may feel old-fashioned today, but still has enough mystery, daft suspicion, and detective work to keep an interested viewer watching until the truth finally comes out.